Today, let's make Seitan Pizzaiola, which is seitan in the style of pizza.
Now, we're not making pizza tonight,
No,
so don't get confused. It's just the ingredients and how they're used to flavor the seitan steak in this particular case that gives it that name.
Exactly. But that means we need to make some seitan.
We're going to start with 1 cup of vital wheat gluten.
And yes, you really do have to use vital wheat gluten to make this, because just regular flour is not going to work. If you wanted to do a wash the flour method, that's a whole other recipe. And if enough people ask, I'll work on that too and make one of those, because I've been getting into wash the flour method seitan lately, and I really like it. Okay, so 1 cup of VWG. Did I just sprinkle it everywhere? Yeah.
That's all right. That's all right.
Oh, yeah, just a little bit. And then
3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast.
Okay. And this is kind of like a dough conditioner. It just helps to soften it up a little bit. By the way, this is more or less a 1-pan dish. Yeah, actually, it's all 1 pan.
1 teaspoon of bouillon.
And for that, we're using this consommé. We'll have it linked below. But you can use pretty much any vegan or plant-based bouillon that you like. This one is like a chicken flavor, but it works really, really well in this particular seitan.
Just a teaspoon.
Just a teaspoon? And yes, I'm eyeballing everything because it's a very forgiving recipe.
Surprise! A teaspoon each of onion powder and garlic powder.
I don't think there's a recipe in the plant-based world that doesn't have one or both of these in it in some way. It's a little more garlicky. That's okay with me.
We have some wet ingredients. Do you want to mix that up first, or do you want to go ahead and add this? The reason why I'm urging Brian to mix it at this stage is that particular bouillon gets really clumpy. So if he mixes it and incorporates it into the other ingredients, hopefully we can avoid that, but who knows?
But I have another idea.
Okay.
So we also need about a 1/2 cup of water. I have slightly over a 1/2 cup of water here, and that's okay. I'm going to take, how much vinegar do I need?
You need 2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar.
This is white wine vinegar. You could use apple cider if you really want to. I think it imparts a little bit too much flavor.
Yeah.
We're just trying to combat the VWG taste that some people get. It doesn't bother me so much, but some people don't like it. How much is it? 2 tablespoons?
2 tablespoons.
All right, we're using quite a bit today.
And then 1 teaspoon of browning sauce.
This is like Gravy Master, Bouquet, whatever brand you can get. I use it in gravies. I use it in seitan a lot to help flavor it. 1 teaspoon?
1 teaspoon.
It's just super dark. So it makes this look more like a beef-like product rather than a chicken-like product. And I'm going to dump more than half of this in because I know in general I need probably 1/2 cup of liquid. So most of it. We'll just reserve a little bit. That's where I should have mixed it up, but I didn't. Probably going to use it all anyway. And then just start mixing. It's looking really dry, so I'm just going to add in some more. Probably going to end up using all of it, like I said, but I'm reserving just a tablespoon in case. Because you can always put more in, but you can't take it back out. But I totally need it all. This is why we write recipes and test them, you know, to make sure that we got the measurements right. But seitan can be kind of a fickle thing sometimes. Sometimes you'll need more liquid, sometimes less.
Sometimes he'll change his mind in the middle of the recipe.
Yeah. That happens once in a while. Okay. At this point, you know, sometimes you just got to use the best tools you got. They happen to be at the end of your arms. Good, clean pair of hands. And I'm just going to get in there and mix this together. I do not want this to be a super wet dough. That's the trick here. But this is looking even more dry than I expected. See, this is one of those times that I need even more than I thought because there's still a lot of dry ingredient there. So I need some more water. I grabbed another 1/2 cup, but I don't think I'm going to need quite that much. So I'm just going to put a couple tablespoons in and move it around. Just trying to get all that dry off the bowl. See how much is still in there? That's crazy. We don't want to waste all that. It should be in our seitan. And as I start moving it around, I can like scrape the sides. It still needs a little bit more though. So probably like 3/4 of a cup of water altogether, I would say. Or close to that. I'm just kind of scrubbing the sides. I mean, it's your vital wheat gluten. You paid for it. It should be used. And we're getting there. See, the bowl's coming more or less clean.
Have you ever used an eraser to get glue residue off of something? It's kind of the same technique where you use the mass of the wheat gluten seitan ball to get the other stuff off.
And if you really need to, you can scrape it with the spoon. You know, it comes off easy. I'm kind of anal about it. I like to get it all, you know?
Waste not, want not.
Exactly. That's how I grew up, you know? Like, we used everything. Just make it count. That looks pretty good now. Okay, let's get that out of the way. And get that out of the way. And now, put it on your board. Give it a good knead. Now, if it looks like it's very wet, you can add a little bit of vital wheat gluten to your board, kind of like bench flour. If it looks too dry and it's crumbly and falling apart, you probably wanted to add more liquid before you put it out here. So put it back in the bowl, mix in a little bit more water. You will see some of the consomme stuff and even sometimes nutritional yeast, little bits and pieces in it. That's really fine. They'll break up.
Yeah, some nutritional yeast are larger flake and that will show up.
Yeah, this particular brand that we're using now is a little more flaky than powdery. So yeah, I just stretch it, flip it, fold it in half, and then do that again. And I just keep kneading it that way. And then eventually you can kind of do this, and you see that skin forming on the top, and it's holding together really nice. That is exactly what we're looking for. And now comes the shaping process. I tend to like this to be thinner, think cutlet, rather than chop, if that makes sense. So I'm just gonna kind of pound it out a little bit. If you let this relax for a little while, it's sometimes easier to do. Well, you know what? We're really cooking here, so I'm gonna do it live for you right now. And see, I made like a donut, so that's not cool. So I'm gonna just stretch some of that and press it back together. That's the beautiful thing about this stuff, is it just holds together. You can beat on it, let out your frustrations. It's okay. Does the whole table shake when I do that?
I think so.
I don't know if the camera shakes though. The table shakes, so the camera not moving makes it look like everything's shaking probably. I don't know. Treat it like pizza dough. And I'm just kind of pinching the outside edge and getting it bigger and bigger and bigger. See, it's pizzaiola.
Yeah.
This is not why it's called pizzaiola.
No.
Traditionally, it's made using steak.
Like flank steak or something?
Actually, a good steak, like a ribeye or something. But usually in a thin cut, not really super thick. But we don't use those kinds of things around here.
No.
So we're making it plant-based.
And seitan tends to poof up as you cook it, so you want to take your time with it and try to get it thin-ish as much as you can without tearing it.
Now, this will also serve like 3, maybe 4 people, the amount that we're making today. So that's something to keep in mind too. Oh, another thing that we did is butter beans. We're going to be using butter beans. You can get a can of butter beans or cook them in your Instant Pot. I just took a cup of butter beans with some water, cooked them for, I think it was 33 minutes. And when it was done, I released the pressure and took them out, stuck them in the fridge. But a can would work just as well. You'll need those in a little while. I'm just going to keep working this for a while. It does take a few minutes, but your patience will be rewarded. All right, once I have it approximately the way I want it, now it's time to start searing this off. Meet you at the stove. Okay, so I have a nonstick pan on about 6 out of 10 on my stove, getting nice and pretty hot. I have a sprayer with some canola oil, just a few sprays to help with nonstick. And then we have our hunk o' seitan. I'll just drop that into the pan. You should hear a sizzle. If you don't hear a sizzle, your pan is not hot enough. Then my Lodge burger press. One of my favorite things to use for making seitan. Just gonna put it on there. Make sure it's not sticking to the pan at all and press down a little bit. That helps to keep the seitan from expanding too much as it cooks. And go about maybe 3 to 5 minutes per side, depending on how hot your pan is. But we're looking for a nice brown crust. I'll show you in a moment. Okay, so it's been about 3 minutes. I want to take the burger press off and give this a flip so we can see what the other side looks like. Nice and golden brown. That's what we want. We use that burger press again. Pop it right on top. Move it around. I'm not pushing down on it so much anymore. That's about the diameter that I really want. That's about the size I want, thickness and everything. So I'm just leaving it on there as a weight to keep it from puffing up. Seitan has a tendency to fill with little air bubbles and they'll puff up kind of like a bread, but there's really no starch in here to make bread, but those protein strands, if pressed together, don't actually do that. Okay, another 3 or 4 minutes has passed. Let's flip this over. Nice and golden brown. Take it out of that pan, put it on a plate, set it to the side. Oh, kill the heat too. Now we need some toppings for our pizzaiola, and to start off with, let's go with onion.
Ta-da!
1 medium onion. Just chop the ends off, cut it in half, just like we always do. You know, there's nothing new here. And peel off that brown stuff that nobody actually wants to eat. Then I'm just gonna get all the paper off myself. I'm just gonna slice it up. Just, you know, maybe 1/8 of an inch to almost 1/4 of an inch thick slices. Don't get too crazy, but keep all the fingers that you started with, and then you win. I'll make a little room. We got lots of stuff today.
We're also going to be chopping up a red bell pepper and some mushrooms, but because I'm using this bowl for our finished parts, I'm just going to go ahead and get these out, and then Brian can move his sliced onion back into the bowl. Does that work?
Sure, that's perfect. But I want to be able to see what I'm doing. All of it.
I'm going to put the onion way over there so I don't cry on camera.
Oh, they're getting a little strong for you, huh? Then we're going to do pepper. Now, I cut peppers a little bit differently than some people might. I've seen like the roll-out method and all that. I don't do that. I just kind of shave it like this and stay near the rib and then go all the way down into the core, and I get a nice piece like that. And I just go all the way around it and end up with that much. Goes in the... Doesn't go in compost anymore, right? We use it
Nope,
for...
it goes for veggie broth.
Veggie broth. And I just like to cut the ribs out because, I don't know, I don't know. I've always just done it that way. People say, oh, you don't have to. You don't. Like in actual chilies, some people like to do that because it takes some of the heat down, because that's where most of the capsaicin is. But, I don't know. And these, it's prettier if you cut them out. But you don't have to. I won't tell if you don't. And then, just strips. Probably 1/4 inch or so. These are going to cook for a while, so it's totally okay for them to be a little bit on the bigger side. All right, bring that bowl over here, please. And we'll cover those onions up with the peppers so that they no longer make her cry. And then mushrooms. Just like I always do, I cut that last bit of the stem off. Just always, you know, there's stuff on it, the growing medium and all that, and just looks nasty. I don't want to eat it, do you? But they go into the broth, and they make the broth taste awesome, so it's all good. That's an odd-looking mushroom. Look at that. It's like 2 mushrooms grown together.
Siamese mushroom.
It makes cutting the stem out challenging. I had to go in from 2 different sides. And then just slice them up. 1/4 inch or so. It's all good. And again, into the bowl. Next step, see you over at the stove. Okay, so I have a nonstick pan over medium-high heat. It's at like 6 out of 10. In go our vegetables. If you did not hear that sizzle, it means that my noise reduction worked really well. But if you don't hear it when you do it at home, it means your pan wasn't hot enough yet. Then just get in there with a set of tongs and move everything around. At this point, I'd like to add just a pinch of salt. That helps the veggies give up their juices, if you will, and makes it a lot easier to cook it in the pan. Notice I didn't add any oil to the pan. And we'll cook that for a few minutes and give it a stir as needed to keep it from sticking. Okay, once our vegetables have softened up quite a bit, they're looking really good, I'm going to add in our liquid. And for that, I'm using 2 cans of diced tomatoes. You can just use like a jar of pre-made sauce if you really want to. That doesn't bother me at all. Last time I made it, that's how I did it. We try to use the low salt or no salt versions if possible. And give that a mix around. I still have it up on 6 for temperature, so it's still a pretty hot pan. And I'm going to add in a 1/2 cup of white wine. And just because it looks a little bit on the dry side, I'm going to put about another 1/2 cup of water in there. And just give it a good stir through. Now it's time for some seasonings. A nice half teaspoon or so of salt. Fresh cracked black pepper, probably another half teaspoon of that. I have dried basil, but if you had fresh, you could use that too. I'm going to use a tablespoon of dried basil. Eyeball it is all good. One of the things I love in tomato sauce is thyme, so I'm going to add about a tablespoon of dried thyme. Again, fresh would be fine too. You just need about double if you use fresh. I always like to add a little bit of crushed red pepper flake to my tomato sauces. I think it livens them up a little bit. It doesn't really make it spicy so much, but it does add a little flavor backing to it. That's probably 1/4 to 1/2 of a teaspoon. Use more if you like, use less if you don't. And our fresh garlic is in the fridge, and the fridge is actually behind a couple of sound blankets right now, so I'm just going to use some garlic powder instead of garlic, but you can certainly use fresh garlic. Let's go with about a tablespoon. And then mix all those seasonings through. This should be very liquidy right now. It should be. It's supposed to be. That's by design. Pan's starting to get kind of full. But we're not done yet. There's more going in here. And the first thing going in is our seitan. I did tell you this was going to be a one-pan dish because the seitan was seared, but it's not actually done cooking. So now what I want to do is get all that stuff out from under it, if I can, and put it on top of it to cook it in this sauce. Because the searing process is only one part. You definitely want to simmer this because it is still very raw in the middle. The trick here is get it submerged. That's what I'm looking for. I just want it to be underneath that liquid. Something like that. And now, well, I'm going to monitor this so that it just stays kind of at a bare simmer. So I'm going to turn the heat down to probably 3 to 4 on my stove. And when I just see little bubbles coming up, I know we're in the right temperature zone. You don't want this to go too hot and you don't want this to go too cold. You are actually doing the simmer of your seitan right in that sauce. Okay, you see this right here? That little bit of bubbling and just a little tiny bit over here? That's pretty much as hot as I want this to be. So I'm actually going to turn this down even a little bit more. It's now between 2 and 3 on my stove, and I'm going to let that go for a half an hour. Okay, so there's about 20 minutes left to go on this. Now I have our butter beans. Now this is not actually normal for a pizzaiola. The first time we did it, we had a can of butter beans and I thought, you know, let's use the butter beans instead of pasta for this because they actually work really nice. They're nice and soft. They work really well in this kind of dish. Now I just want to mix them through, get them all over the place, get them in the sauce. And the starches in those beans will also help to thicken the sauce a bit as well. My pan is getting very, very full. The trick is to just keep that seitan under the liquid if you can. It's okay if it's a little covered by some of the beans and the veg. Just want to make sure there's plenty of liquid on top of it. And I'll let this go for the last 20 minutes. Okay, so our half hour is up, but see how liquidous this sauce is? It's a little too much for me, and when I move the seitan around, it just feels a little soft still, so I'm just going to give it another 15 minutes. And then we'll be back. Okay, another 15 minutes has gone by. And now what I want to do, as you notice, there's a little bit less liquid in here than there was before. But I want to grab that seitan, pull it out completely, and I'm going to flip it over and place it on top. That was the easiest way to do that, so that way it's all alone in there, so to speak. And now, I'm going to use some of these Daiya mozzarella shreds. You can use pretty much any kind of plant-based cheese you like, but I like this one for this. I'm going to spread some of that around. I mean, you know, it really wouldn't be like pizza-like if it didn't have cheese, right? And now, the easiest way to get plant-based cheese like this to melt is to cover it with a lid. So I'm going to place a lid on top of it. Hopefully nothing's really touching the lid much. Not really so much. And give that a few minutes until it melts down. Okay, so I took the lid off. It was maybe like 5 to 8 minutes or so. Cheese is nicely melted. Seitan's sitting nice on top. We have all of our veggies and beans underneath. We'll meet you over at the table for a tasting. My favorite time of every cooking video. We get to taste this. Got a little bit of seitan here. Got a little bit of cheese on it. We got some of the beans. We got some of the sauce.
Now, if you want extra cheese on this, you could totally use our shaky cheese, our homemade shaky cheese, and add that for a different cheese element.
I would totally put that on at the table.
Yeah.
Nice topper.
These butter beans really work as a pasta replacement. They're kind of reminiscent of like a gnocchi.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Both
work.
in their shape and their texture.
Yeah. The seitan should come out a little softer than you might think, because think of it like a braised meat rather than a truly like it is, huh? All right, I'm going to try it now.
This is so good.
That really is. There's like an explosion of flavors happening. You have the little bit of tomato sweetness, and then all the spices and herbs in there, and then the bell pepper comes through, and the onion, a little bit of crunch. The beans add like this nice smooth creaminess, but then the seitan has that lovely chew, perfect texture for a seitan, and the cheese on top just really does it for me.
Yeah.
As you can tell, we don't like this at all. Okay, let's talk storage options. If you remove the seitan from the entire thing and refrigerate them separately, I think this will last a while in the fridge. If you try to keep it all together, it's going to get messy, going to get nasty. I don't really want to freeze any of this. I think the beans would get weird and mushy. The seitan itself might be fine, but the cheese on top might be a problem. So if you needed to freeze, leave the beans out, freeze the sauce, add the beans later, leave the cheese off, freeze the seitan. So it kind of, you just, you totally took it all apart. So,
right, but there's options, and I think you disassembled it nicely for long storage. Like if you're doing meal prep, you can meal prep separate things. You can even pre-cook the beans if you don't have canned beans and just keep those in the refrigerator.
Yep. And honestly, butter beans are just good all around. They're one of we just discovered them, and they're like my new favorite bean. Yeah. They're just a big lima bean, but they're really good.
And in the sauce, they absorb some of the flavors, so they're not as bland as you may have experienced them in the past if you were like me and decided you didn't like lima beans.
Yep.
My mind's been
Another
changed.
thing you can do with this, if you don't want to use the lima beans or the butter beans, is you can take some pasta and throw that in. Kind of like what we did in our one-pot pasta. You can cook it right in that sauce, like only 15, 20 minutes, and it comes out beautiful. That will thicken that sauce up a lot, too.
It will. The starch from pasta will thicken the sauce, and the flavors of the sauce will get into the pasta.
Into the pasta. It's a lovely 1-2 punch.
Yep.
If you really wanted to be fancy, use a larger container, larger pot or pan than I did, and do both butter beans and pasta.
That's just crazy.
Sounds really, really good right now. Makes me wonder if I can still do that. But we are going to have this for dinner tonight. And if you have any questions or any suggestions on new dishes that you'd like to see us try to make plant-based, let us know in the comments below. And as always, guys, thanks so much for watching. And we'll see you next time on The Bistro.